welcome to the fourth video in my series of pre-beginner crochet tutorials. This is Jessica here at Sister Sue's Crochet, and I just kind of wanted to go over how to start a new skein of yarn. The last couple videos that I've made have led you to go to the store, buy your first skein of yarn. I kind of talked about the different types of yarn and what size would be good to start with, and I also touched on the different size crochet hooks and how gauge can affect your work. So now I really want to start getting into starting your first project. So the first thing you'll need to do is you go to the store, you buy a skein of yarn, and luckily on this skein it actually shows you that this over here, this A, this is the outer strand of your skein, and then B here is your middle strand of the skein. So let me zoom out a little bit here. As you can see, I'm pulling from the middle, and this just makes things a lot easier when you're working on a project. If you were to pull from the outside of your skein while you were pulling more yarn for you to work with, your skein would be rolling all over the floor and just making a big mess. So if you work from the inner strand of your skein, the yarn pulls out very nicely and it is much easier to work with. So what I like to do is, since not all skeins will actually tell you that one side is the outer and one side is the inner, I'm going to use this skein as an example here because I think that it just shows up a little bit better on video. But what I've done is I got my skein of yarn, and I like to take my fingers and just kind of put them in the middle of there, kind of just move them around to, you know, make some space in there because the yarn is packed pretty tightly in this skein. So you should be able to identify your outer strand much easier than your inner strand. Sometimes the outer strand will actually be like on this skein, it was stuck to the label, but a lot of times it'll just be like sitting there loose. You can see it, and when you pull it, you can tell by the way that you pull it that it's coming from the outside of the skein. So what I do is I take my outer strand and I just wrap it around the middle of my skein and kind of secure it so that it doesn't get mixed in with my working end of the yarn from the inner strand, and doesn't make like a big ball of tangled up yarn mess, which I assure you will happen to you in the first few projects that you try to make. It's just inevitable. You're gonna have a yarn yarn problem where your yarn gets tangled, and it's no fun, but it is part of the territory that comes along with learning how to crochet. So I have my inner strand here. This is considered your working end of the yarn. So to make your slip stitch, in order to create your first project, you have to make a slip stitch that ties onto your hook, and this is what you use to create your starting chain. We'll go over more in another video how to start your starting chain, but for right now I just wanted to do a tutorial on how to get that slip knot made. So you can see here that I've got the end of my yarn. I'm going to take that end, and I'm just doing this on a flat table so that way it's a little more visually savvy. It'll be more helpful to you, hopefully. So I'm going to take that end and I'm going to just make like a circle here, and I just want to spread this apart so you can see. So we've got my end and it's laying over the working part of my yarn. Take the circle, flip it over, and now you can see we still have our end over here, and then there is this piece that is in the center of your circle. You want to pull that piece up and put your hook through that. Now you should be able to pull this tight. You don't want to pull it too tight, but you just want to pull it tight enough. And if you grab the working end of your yarn, not the loose string here, and you pull, it will tighten to your hook. And you want to make sure that you leave a little bit of a tail here, because I know in the past videos I've made, I've told you guys about how you have ends that you have to sew in. So this is an example of the very first end that you would have in any project that you would need to sew in. So you want this to be a few inches long so that way that you have some room to work with it. If you make it too short, which I can probably show you just by doing a simple slip knot here. This little tail is really short, and you're going to have a very hard time weaving that into your ends and making it secure so that it doesn't pop out of your project later on. So it is kind of important to just kind of leave a few inches of a tail there. So we'll go over that again. Here we have this is the end of the yarn here from the middle. We're going to take it and we're going to make a circle and cross over the working yarn. We have this loop here now. So I'm going to take this loop and I'm going to flip it over the working part of the yarn. Be careful not to let your end come out of there, because if it does, then you won't be able to do the slip stitch correctly. And just pull that middle piece up. And if you grab the working end and the loose end and tighten them, that makes your slip stitch. I'm sorry, not your slip stitch, your slip knot. So I'm going to grab my working yarn, secure it around my hook, and there you have it. That is your very first part of making any project, is making your slip knot onto your hook so that you can proceed to make your starting chain. So you don't have to do your slip knot like this on the table like I was showing you, but it really helped me when I very first started, because I noticed a lot of crochet tutorials, even the beginner ones, they start off with you making your chain, but they don't really go into how to make that slip knot. And if you've never done it before, then it is challenging because you don't know what you're doing and you're brand new at it. So I just thought it was more visually appealing to do it on a table like this. You could really see what was happening. If you just wanted to take your yarn and make a slip knot, you would basically just take your yarn, you would grab the loose end, then you would grab your working end and pull it through. And that also makes a slip knot. And that's much more simple if you were just sitting and making a project. It's kind of hard to describe how to make a slip knot after you've already been making slip knots for so long, because you become so accustomed to just, there you go, there's a slip knot. So it is kind of challenging for me to break it down like each step and show you how to make a slip knot, but hopefully this has been helpful to you. In the videos to come, I hope you stay tuned and follow my pre-beginner tutorial series. But in the ones to come, we'll be discussing starting chains and how to begin your very first project. So hopefully you'll stay tuned. Any questions or comments, please leave them below, and thanks again so much for watching.